the two can do. Too good. SWV created one of the greatest debut albums of all time with It's About Time, released in July of 1992. The group consisted of Tamara Taj George, Leanne Lily Lyons, and the lead singer Cheryl Coko Gamble. The group was formed by Lily in 1988, and the girls spent the next 3 years homing in their signature harmonies and vocal chemistry. They struck gold when they met producer and songwriter Brian Alexander Morgan, who gave them the songs for their demo, which got them signed to RCA, and he went on to produce 8 songs out of the 13 on their debut album. 1992 is a very important year for the genre, with game-changing albums like It's About Time, Mary J. Blige's What's the 411, moving the genre outside of New Jack Swing. On It's About Time, a lot of the songs can be considered New Jack Swing, but a distinctive part of New Jack Swing, which is this more industrial sounding type of music, with the beats being more hard-hitting and having like this clankiness to them. We can look at TLC, who emerged a few months before SWV, also in 1992. So interestingly, SWV at one point were going by the name TLC before they got hit with like a cease and desist. Because the producers on their album, like Babyface, L.A. Reid, Daryl Simmons, I'm thinking of Dallas Austin, they're a bit more rooted in the New Jack Swing tradition, in the sense where their album came out in 1992, but the music feels like it could have been from any point of the New Jack Swing era. Whereas SWV's music and Alexander Morgan's type of production particularly, it had a smoother, more melodic approach and sort of hip-hop soul, like the kind of sound that Mary would explore on her album. TLC's production was very hip-hop and New Jack Swing, whereas SWV's, their first album really felt like an infusion of the sounds. And this combined with SWV's lush and fuller sound compared to a solo act, it was a perfect storm for success. You can hear my laptop like an oven. I don't want to also forget about Vogue, who with their 1999 album and their 1992 album Born to Sing had immense success, which again paved the way for female groups of the 90s to come in and kind of build on their success. Particularly as after their Born to Sing album, they took a 5-year gap and they never really kind of, it was really those first 2 albums which were massive. Their debut single Right Here peaked at 92 on the Hot 100 and 16 on the R&B and hip hop chart. Another high-tempo single was issued for their second single, I'm So Into You, which was really their breakthrough and peaked at number 6 on the Hot 100. Then came the song that really cemented the success of the album and will go down as a all-time classic, Weak, which went number 1 on both the Hot 100 and the R&B and hip-hop charts. And this was at a time where R&B ballads were having massive success. Look at something like Boyz II Men, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, even You Up and Down Till I Say Stop. Yeah. The next songs issued as a double A-side single was Downtown, which is a mid-tempo song very similar to Weak, basically about head. Lots of songs about head. There was also in 1993 If by Janet Jackson, which again is all about the good head. And I've not actually put this in my notes, but the sound on Janet's album, her 1993 album, had a lot of influences from It's About Time. But Downtown had a music video and a solo release in the UK. And then the other A-side was a remix of Right Here, this time sampling Michael Jackson's Human Nature. The remix was featured on the Free Willy soundtrack and was wildly successful, really continuing the momentum of Weak. Although it's credited to Teddy Riley, who had a strong working relationship with Michael Jackson after doing the Dangerous album, and I think he was responsible for the sample being cleared, and it was actually for free. Michael Jackson let the girls use it for free. It was actually conceptualized by Alan All-Star Gordon, who produced the original sample beat of Human Nature. And then apparently what happened after that is Teddy basically and his team reproduced that beat and re-recorded the song with the girls. Another fun fact is Teddy Riley's young protege, Pharrell Williams, who was 20 years old at the time, features on the song with the SWV. Right Here and Downtown charted at number 1 on the US R&B and hip hop charts and number 2 on the Hot 100. The penultimate single on the album, You're Always on My Mind, featuring producer Brian Alexander Morgan, performed moderately, landing at 54 on the Hot 100 and number 8 on the R&B and hip hop chart. The final single was used on the Above the Rim soundtrack and was another all-star remix of the low-tempo song Anything, which was transformed into this upbeat hip-hop track featuring the Wu-Tang Clan, which was really an amazing way to end an album era where they really came out of the gate as this perfect package. Excellent vocals, fun personalities, great songs with great reinventions through remixes, truly adding something amazing to the 90s R&B canon. Despite this, and the success, which was never really repeated again by the group, the crown jewel of their discography is New Beginning, their second album released on April 23rd, 1996, which for me is exactly the album when people talk about loving 90s R&B, this is what people are talking about. This is one of the, if not the definitive album of the 90s. Before I really kind of discuss this album and why I love it so much, I want to discuss why this album is often excluded from conversation and why the album era was not lackluster, but how it was sort of stifled. A big part of the lack of success with this album is the evolving nature of R&B at the time, particularly during the middle of the decade. And firstly, let's go back to It's About Time, which had a relatively long era. In the 90s, albums would have about maybe 5 singles, sometimes even more. For example, Janet Jackson's 1993 album had 9 singles and lasted from 1993 to the middle of 1995. But I think if we compare SWV's album run with some of their contemporaries, it gives very good perspective. Mary J. Blige's What's the 411 era lasted from June the 23rd, 1992 to the 6th of August 1994, which was 2 years and a month. TLC's On the TLC Tip lasted from November the 22nd, 1991 to the 5th of June 1993, which was 1 year and 6 months. Xscape's Humming Coming At Ya lasted from the 17th of August 1993 to the 24th of September 1994, which lasted 1 year and 1 month. SWV's It's About Time era lasted from the 20th of August 1992 to the 24th of September 1994, which, like What's the 411, lasted 2 years and 1 month. However, it only took Mary less than 3 months to kickstart the My Life era with the release of Be Happy. TLC took 1 year and 4 months to start the Crazy Sexy Cool era with the release of Creep. But this is just as SWV have finished this album era, and this is material which date back to as far as 1991. Xscape, who debuted halfway into the About Time era and ended at the same week as SWV, had their album era start 8 months later with the release of Feel So Good. By the time SWV released the lead single to A New Beginning, all the aforementioned errors were done. And there's a few factors here to explore. Coko, who was the lead singer, basically became pregnant in 1995. And pregnancy in the music industry was frowned upon as it really halts the cyclical nature of a music artist's job. You can't tour or promote, and it's really considered off-brand or off-image to have a pregnant person. Tamika Scott of Xscape got pregnant during the promotion of Humming Coming At Ya. And while she kept it a secret, by 5 months, evidently, she couldn't hide it from the group. And her label and management were really annoyed as it basically meant the group couldn't tour as opening acts with R. Kelly that summer. She was threatened with termination from Xscape if she didn't get an abortion, and she's actually heavily pregnant in the Love On My Mind music video, yet still hitting some pretty hard choreo. Similarly, Cindy Herron of En Vogue was heavily pregnant in the What a Man video, but she's always filmed from close up or behind people. Coko had a very similar situation where she hid a pregnancy from the group and management for 5 months whilst they worked on their second album during 1994 and 1995. By the summer, she could no longer hide it, meaning the album had to be pushed back from 1995 to 1996. So they had the chance to finish the album and Coko could give birth and get back into shape to promote the next album. You can actually see that Coko is heavily pregnant in the Tonight's the Night remix with Blackstreet and Craig Mack. She's basically sitting in a chair the whole video while the other 2 ladies are just kind of... And it took me some time to clock this. I'd seen the video a few times before, and it was only when I began to research this video that I clocked and was like... And with, again, when I was talking about her contemporaries, most of her contemporaries had released their follow-up projects where they're making huge leaps in lyrical content, production, and branding, presenting a more grown-up, sexier, maturer image. And SWV were really the last to the feed. Because of the delay to release, they really found themselves being the last at this trend of pivoting to a more mature sound, and at a real transition year for R&B, as a lot of the sounds in which R&B was pivoting towards a more urban hip-hop sound, like 1996's One in a Million, and Genuine the Bachelor, both produced by Timbaland. And then you have albums in 1997 where it really just gets very hip-hop and urban. Usher's My Way, Butterfly by Mariah Carey, albums like that. The sound of this album isn't necessarily dated because it doesn't lean as heavily into like a New Jack Swing sort of sound as the first one. But as you see what happens with this album, you'll understand why contextualizing the date of its release makes sense when you look at its critical and commercial reception, but then also sort of the demise of SWV. Another big thing is the structure around SWV and their label RCA. Kenny Ortiz, who was the vice president of A&R at RCA, was the one who got the girl signed, ensured the success of the first album with marketing and branding them as these sort of around the way girls. He was pivotal, making decisions such as remixing Right Here into Human Nature, and then also getting Wu-Tang Clan to feature on the remix of Anything. He left RCA in July 1995, just as Coko would give birth to her son Jazz, who we actually know now as the rapper Little Tracy, and then for her to return to the studio to complete the album. So now SWV is in the hands of completely new people who are really stirring their direction. They also had replaced their manager Maureen Singleton. So in some sense, it really was a new beginning. But again, and then what we consider as we see how this album went, whether those people were making the right choices, particularly in the A&R direction. And also I think SWV struggled compared to a lot of their female contemporaries at the time, just as there was no real, I guess, connection to the personalities and who they are. I think if you watch their reality TV shows now, you can see a lot of that character and you can see the different personalities. So essentially, Lily Crazy, Coko Sexy, and Taj Cool. But that never really came through. I think it kind of seemed like a bit of like a Diana Ross and the Supreme situation where you have Coko as the lead and then the other two at the background. And there was not much of, I guess with the first album, yeah, there's some of that personality there, but it kind of goes away. So all these factors play a role into why the album didn't do as commercially successful as the first album. However, does that matter? No. It doesn't. In the context of the time, there's a reason why this album makes a splash in compared to the wave of the first album. But this is an album which literally is anchored completely in the sound of SWV. And yes, TLC had a blockbuster with Crazy Sexy Cool, and that album really stands the test of time too. But this here is sheer talent. We can look at this album as a little bit long, 17 songs with a running time of 1 hour and 6 minutes. And one could say overstuffed. I mean, the album's second half is really full of like low to mid-tempo ballads. And I guess the album in a cohesive sense, it's not really like a journey, right? It just pretty much stays like that. For me, as an avid music consumer of 90s R&B, I love that. I love R&B. I'm just happy to be here. Like, I'm happy to be in this sonic world of this album. I'm someone who enjoys sequels and sophomore projects, as the artist has slightly more control of themselves and there's less for them to prove. And you really hear that here. And like I said before, in some places there is a lot of the personality and the character in the first album. For example, like when you listen to the start of Right Here, it's like there's this real like camaraderie, this real like there's real playfulness. But here, again, the vocal ability, I could cry. Let's talk singles first. So the lead single of this album was You're the One for Me, which peaked at #1 on the R&B and hip hop charts and went #5 on the Hot 100. I mean, this was the song I knew before diving completely into the album and just falling completely in love with it. But this song is amazing. And it was probably was the best lead single for this album. But I really like how the other songs near it on the track list. What You Need, and on and on. They really flow with each other quite nicely. And it honors the group's original sound again, kind of a bit more New Jack Swing, but it's this refinement that goes on. It's what gives this album a quality that weaves together all the sounds of 90s R&B together. The next single, Use Your Heart, was written and produced by the Neptunes, which became their first song to chart, at number 22 on the Hot 100 and at number 6 on the R&B hip-hop chart. A dazzling 70s inspired track, which is actually vocally produced by Temmie Lewis, who's actually responsible for the Neptunes being recognised, particularly by Teddy Riley, and also Joe, as in I don't want to no more, that Joe, who was heard at the end of the track with a little ad-lib towards the end. The final single was It's All About You, which is another all-star production, and very similar again to tracks like You're the One, What You Need, and on and on. The song charted at 61 on the Hot 100 and 36 on the R&B hip-hop charts. And I really, this was the first single where Coko wasn't leading, it was Taj who was leading the song. If you look at the commercial performance of it, it makes it seem like Coko is really needed to be the lead on all the songs. But what really seemed to happen here is this single came out in November 1996, 4 months after the last single, and by this time they already started working on their next album, Release Some Tension, which they were kind of forced to make. So it seems like RCA didn't really care too much about this album, as it wasn't the massive sales force that It's About Time was, which sold 3 million compared to New Beginnings 1 million. I kind of understand it, because when you have an album that's not selling, you need to find a way for it to sell more. And the problem is here, going into 1997, New Beginning is sort of expired product, in a sense where it's not really reflective of a lot of the big changes going on in R&B at the time. A way you can tell this is because they started issuing CDs and cassettes with them in cheetah print, which they would wear in the Can We music video, a song produced by Missy Elliott and Timbaland for the Booty Cool soundtrack, released 2 months after It's All About You in February of 1997, and it was eventually used on the cover of the Release Some Tension album. So it shows that their priorities had already shifted into whatever was next. And the thing is, like, there is actually some commercial viability here. Songs like Fine Time, I definitely think if you wanna be there for me, would you be there? That's What I'm Here For would have been an amazing third or fourth single, because it does have a bit more of that sound, that urban sound that would kind of become popular in the later half of the decade. I do understand from a business perspective why they were sort of rushed into the studio. But that's the problem with Release Some Tension, because it's overly crafted. It's so clearly been engineered as a product opposed to a body of work like New Beginning was. It's aggressively current and aggressively hip hop. It's like if Chloe's label basically forced her to do collabs with Ice Spice, Nicki Minaj, Lil Baby, Lil Uzi Vert, 21 Savage, and basically all the popular people in rap. And it's just ridiculous, because most of the songs on the album features a rapper, and that's not SWV. It's not sisters with voices. And few songs on this album really kind of capture that essence, that spirit of the group. In fact, all the songs which feature rappers, which I think is like 8 out of the 12, the song opens up with the rapper or the featuring artist. So it's like SWV are featuring artists on their own album. And there are some bright spots here, like Rain and Here For You, but there's a lack on that album that there's an abundance of in New Beginning. And there's a refinement in New Beginning that can't be found in It's About Time. And there's also this idea that basically Brian Alexander Morgan's tracks weren't on the album or picked a single, which kind of contributed to the low commercial performance of the album. And I don't necessarily think that's true, because although like all of his songs from the first album became singles and did really, really well, I don't know if that's true for this album. I generally think there are like some great songs. The album is so consistent in a way where I understand why it might have been hard to pick out some singles. Prime Time would have been a good choice again. Love Is So Amazing. Come waste your time. You should be mine, which is clearly a Faith Evans reject, but I've seen interviews where he suggests that basically management didn't want to use his tracks as singles because he made so much money off the first album. But I think this album, I do think at the time, this album wasn't in the right climate to be released. But my God, has it aged like fine wine. All the producers, Brian Alexander Morgan, the Neptunes, Herbert Middleton, Eric Sermon, Daryl Simmons, even Chucky Thompson was on this joint. They came together to just craft just good R&B music. Again, like I said, timeless, but again, encapsulates the spirit of R&B. It's not bound by a particular sonic profile, especially, again, that second half of the album. I think it's so there's interludes. I think it's after Fine Time, like, and then Love Is So Amazing. Like from there, the album is just a groove. It's just a groove. Like SWV at their core has this ability to craft beautiful music so effortlessly. Like, yes, I've argued, it could have been branded or marketed well, and they could have engineered it a bit better for success. When you go into the studio and make a song like Love Is So Amazing and You Are My Love, none of that matters. No numbers, nothing can quantify the immense quality of the work. This isn't birthed by no A&R, no producers or remixes. This is SWV, the Sisters with Voices, who were born to sing. They were born to just make music together, and it's a genuine classic. And I know we call Brandy the vocal Bible, but this album feels like a genuine Bible for R&B. If you love the genre, if you listen to, sing R&B music, go sit with this album, right? And then come back and thank me. Thank me for changing your life and putting you on and gifting you the opportunity to listen to the greatest R&B album of the 90s. Just SWV, thank you. Like just for this album alone. I know we can talk about Weak, we can talk about anything, the Human Nature remix, Rain, but this second album, you should have won Grammys, you should have won Oscars, you should have just so I don't know whatever y'all had going on, but you came together. And I know there was like some conflict and whatever and the problems in the group that again contributed to its demise, but despite all of that, you did that, and give it up give it up to SWV. Come to know my love, and I'm gonna sing because of copyright. Don't waste my time, you should be mine. Come get to know my love. And you know what? Even on this song right here, Lily is leading. I think this is like the first song she led. And the thing with this song, this is so like obviously a Faith Evans reject from her album, which is another excellent album. Another great mid-decade album. This could have been a single. But also, considering that, I think when you listen to this and then you have a song like You're the One, you can tell perhaps they weren't made at the same time. They weren't made at the same time. Because this is definitely like more 94. You're the one for me. And it's like, you can tell that they were like, oh, okay, like we need a song that captures that, bum, 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 bum vibe of the first album. What would I have done? Maybe that's actually a good question. What would I have done for the first single? This has been my first single. It would have been my first. This right here would have been my first single. Yeah. Because imagine, you've not heard SWV for like 2 years, and they're just coming up with like a pop like this. Oh, I need you be there. Yeah, because you know, like, I loved how with Janet's album, with That's the Way Love Goes, and we feel like you can really come back into a new album era just with like this groove, and that song would have done it. They could have done like remixes or whatever. So you would have had When Your Feeling Comes Over Me, Will You Be There? Yeah, that would have been the first. That would have been the first single. So the Neptunes produced that one. So yeah, and then we would have got, this would have been the second single for me. Yeah, like this is, yes, because this can last. Just remix it a little bit so it can go into 1996, 1997. Would I be there for you? Would you be there for me? So you can tell like they had really good songs, but then they just basically did all the All-Star ones for the singles because All-Star done well. But like, I'm here for second single. Fine Time. I love Fine Time, but you can tell when this was made. This was made, because what I think with this album, I'm kind of going off on a bit of a tangent. I finished the script, so the script is down. You had the bits that they did before Coko got pregnant, and then you have whatever they did after Coko gave birth and came back, and you can feel that on the album. They all mesh well together, but I think because they picked the singles that seem to be like You're the One and It's All About You seem to be on the other side maybe, they should have leaned into the more like this Fine Time. I love Fine Time, but I actually would have done You Are My Love, yeah, for our third single. This is our third single right now. And imagine it, like you can like do, like, the thing is you could just do the same thing with remixes. This would have slapped in 97. This would have slapped in 97. This would have slapped in 97, guys, like. Anyways, and then this would have been the fourth single. This would have been the fourth single. This would have been the, and it would have wrapped up the album era perfectly. This is the fourth single, and then like imagine like a real funky remix. Let me do something real quick. So here, bum 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 bum. This would have fucked it out in 1997. Bum 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 bum. And then like a dark rapper, like could even got some of they used on the third album, but this would have been more organic. Like, come on guys, like, come on. That's what I would have done. And I think because it was really released attention. There's a song on here, the one with Snoop Dogg, and Coko refused to be on it. That's how you know they didn't like the song. There's no lyrics. Let's hear. Like, what's this, man? It's just not like, do you get what I mean? I'm hearing this song and I'm just like, this ain't SWV. And that's what they decided. Listen. But, yeah. Just thank me, because I've just really put you on in a big way. Yeah. Yeah.